The dust of the frontier town of Red Rock swirled through the main street as the evening sun painted the sky with shades of gold and crimson, casting long shadows over the weather-beaten saloon and the crooked jailhouse beside it. Cowboys leaned against hitching posts, spurs clinking, eyes sharp with curiosity, for today was not an ordinary day. Today the sheriff himself had made an announcement that sent whispers racing through the town like wildfire. A man who proves his worth may choose any woman in Red Rock to marry, and I will witness it with my own hand. It was bold, reckless, and stirred both hope and dread in the hearts of women and men alike. Among those who heard it was Luke Carver, a cowboy with a reputation that stretched beyond cattle ranges and poker tables. Tall, broad-shouldered, with eyes as blue as the mountain lakes, he had a presence that made men stand straighter and women lower their gaze shyly. Yet Luke was not just known for his skill with a gun or his ability to tame the wildest stallion. He was known for being a man who kept his word, a man with a soul that still held on to honor when the world around him seemed to trade it away for whiskey and gold. That evening, as the sheriff stood outside the saloon, chest puffed out with authority, he repeated his challenge. Any cowboy with courage and strength enough can pick his bride. The law won't stop him. My blessing is on it. Choose, and the woman will be yours. A silence hung heavy, broken only by the creak of saddle, leather, and the nervous laugh of someone at the far end of the street. Women clutched their shawls tighter, some blushing at the thought of being chosen, others fearful. It was then that Luke stepped forward, boots echoing against the hard earth, his shadow long and unyielding. He didn't smile, didn't swagger, just walked steady, eyes locked on the sheriff. The sheriff smirked, perhaps expecting Luke to pick one of the town's admired beauties, Clara, with her golden hair and sharp wit, or Maria, the saloon singer whose songs melted hardened men to silence. But Luke's gaze drifted elsewhere, past the shimmering gowns and painted lips, to a figure standing apart in the shadows near the edge of the crowd. Her name was Ruth. She was larger than most women in town, with a round face and kind, timid eyes that darted downward whenever attention fell her way. For years, Ruth had endured whispers, cruel jokes, and dismissive stares. She was called the Obese girl by those who lacked the, decency to see past her body. She had grown used to being overlooked, used to standing in corners while other women danced, used to sewing clothes for others but never being asked to wear a fine dress herself. Yet beneath her quietness, Ruth carried a warmth, a gentleness that only those who truly knew her could see. She had tended to sick children when fevers swept through town, cooked meals for widows when no one else bothered, and mended torn shirts for cowboys who could barely pay her with a nod. Still, she was never seen as someone a man would choose, until now. Luke's voice cut through the murmurs. Sheriff? I've made my choice. The sheriff's eyes gleamed with expectation. Go on then, cowboy. Say the name. Take the one every man wants, and let the town cheer you. But Luke didn't turn to Clara or Maria. He didn't look at the women who preened or the ones who fluttered their lashes. He lifted a steady hand and pointed to Ruth, standing frozen, disbelief written across her face. The street gasped and laughter bubbled from cruel lips. Someone shouted, "The big one? Surely he's joking." But Luke's tone was iron, his words sharp enough to silence mockery. I choose Ruth, and if any man laughs at her again, he'll answer to me. Ruth's eyes widened, her lips trembling. She couldn't move, couldn't speak, as though the world had tilted beneath her feet. Never had anyone defended her so publicly, so fiercely. The sheriff blinked, his smirk fading into something between confusion and annoyance. Carver, you've got your pick of the finest. Why her? Luke's eyes didn't waver. Because she's worth more than any diamond in this town. Because beauty ain't skin deep, Sheriff. And if these men can't see it, that's their blindness, not mine. Ruth has a heart bigger than the plains, and I'd be a fool not to see it. The crowd shifted uncomfortably. Some women bit their lips in shame, realizing they had judged Ruth wrongly. Men who had mocked her looked away, cowed by the raw steel in Luke's voice. Ruth finally found her breath, tears sliding down her cheeks, but not from sorrow, this time. From a dawning light of hope, of dignity returned to her in a way she never thought possible. Luke, she whispered, her voice breaking. He stepped toward her, closing the distance, and with the whole town watching, he took her hand gently in his calloused one. If you'll have me, Ruth, I'll be the man who stands beside you till the end of my days. You don't need to change for me, not a thing. You're already everything I want." The silence broke into murmurs, some in awe, some still too stubborn to understand. But Ruth's heart, which had long lived in shadows, now burned with a flame brighter than the sunset above them. She nodded, whispering yes through tears, and the cowboy, who could have chosen any woman, embraced the one no one expected him to. The sheriff grumbled but could not deny what had been spoken. He raised his hand and declared, "So be it. By the authority of this badge, I bless the union of Luke Carver and Ruth Thompson." The town erupted, not in cheers, not at first, but in the slow ripple of realization that they had witnessed something greater than pride, greater than vanity. They had seen true courage, not in the draw of a gun or the taming of a horse, but in the choosing of a woman for her soul, not her size. And in that moment, Ruth stood taller than she ever had, her shoulders back, her heart steady, for she knew she was loved, chosen and cherished. That night, as lanterns flickered and the town quieted, whispers no longer mocked her but spoke her name with respect. Luke and Ruth sat beneath the stars, her head resting on his shoulder, his arm wrapped around her. "Why me?" she asked softly. He smiled, kissing her forehead. "Because you've always been the strongest, Ruth. Took more strength to endure what you did than it ever took me to ride a bronc or face a gunfight, and I want a woman with that kind of courage by my side." She closed her eyes, peace flooding her soul for the first time in years. The cowboy had chosen her, not because she was the only one left, not because of pity, but because he saw her worth when the world refused to, and that made her the richest woman in Red Rock. And dear listener, if this story touched your heart, if you believe true love sees beyond appearances, if you felt Ruth's triumph and Luke's courage stir something deep within, then don't just leave it here. Subscribe to this channel, because more powerful stories await you. Stories that prove love, honor, and courage still matter. Every click, every subscription helps keep these stories alive, spreading hope where it's needed most. Join this journey, and let's keep inspiring together. The days after Luke Carver chose Ruth were unlike anything Red Rock had ever seen before. For the town that once laughed at Ruth now found itself staring at her with new eyes, though not all of them kindly, and the whispers that trailed her in the dusty streets were no longer just cruel jokes but sharp daggers of envy, doubt, and bitter spite. Women who once thought themselves superior now struggled to understand how a man as admired as Luke could turn away from them. And some of the men muttered darkly in saloons that the cowboy had humiliated them by lifting up a woman they all had cast aside. And though Luke didn't care for their opinions, Ruth did feel their eyes heavy and cutting. And sometimes she wondered if she had the strength to stand under the weight of her new place beside him. But Luke, every time he saw her shoulders slump or her eyes drop, would take her hand in his broad, calloused grip and remind her in that steady voice that cut through storms, "Ruth, you're mine, and I chose you, not for what they see, but for what I see. And if they've got a problem with that, let them say it to my face." And no man in Red Rock dared challenge him, for Luke Carver's fists were as quick as his gun, and his heart was fiercer than both. Yet still, life was not easy, for Ruth had to adjust to being the center of attention in a town that once ignored her, and Luke knew that love was not just about defending her with words, but about building her confidence with actions. So he began taking her everywhere he went, into the saloon, into the marketplace, riding with her on his horse through the wide plains, making it clear that she was his partner, his equal, and no one would ever push her to the shadows again. One evening, as they sat outside their small cabin Luke had built near the river, Ruth finally spoke of the fear she carried. "Luke, what if I can't be the woman you deserve? What if I don't fit into the life of a cowboy's wife?" And Luke turned to her, his jaw strong, his eyes glowing in the firelight, and said, "Ruth, the life of a cowboy's wife isn't about riding fancy or pouring whiskey smooth. It's about having a heart that keeps a man standing when the world tries to knock him down. And you've already been that for me. You just don't see it yet." His words sank deep, but before Ruth could answer, trouble came riding fast, for the sheriff, though he had blessed their union publicly, was not a man who liked to be made a fool of, and in private he carried a grudge, whispering to others that Luke had mocked his authority by choosing Ruth, the one woman no one else would have chosen. and soon the sheriff's bitterness began to spread like rot among certain men in town. One night, while Luke was away helping a rancher round up stray cattle, Ruth heard the pounding of boots outside their cabin, and before she could bolt the door, 3 men barged in, rough, drunk, and sneering. "So this is the woman the great Luke Carver threw away the town's prettiest for," one slurred, circling her like a predator. "Thought you could play queen, did you?" Ruth's heart pounded in terror, but she remembered Luke's words, "Stand tall. Don't hide," and though her voice trembled, she said, "If you've got something to say it to Luke when he returns." "Not to me," the men laughed, one grabbing her arm roughly, but just as fear threatened to crush her, hoofbeats thundered outside, and Luke burst in, rage blazing in his eyes. The fight that followed shook the cabin, fists cracking, wood splintering, curses flying, but Luke fought like a storm unleashed. Every blow fueled by the fury of seeing his woman threatened, and when it was done, the 3 men lay groaning in the dirt outside, too broken to rise. Luke turned to Ruth, his chest heaving, blood on his knuckles, and when he saw her tears, he feared she might shrink back from his violence, but instead she ran into his arms, clinging to him, whispering, "You came back for me. You always come back?" And he held her tight, vowing, "As long as I live, I'll always come back." Ruth. Yet this fight was only the beginning, for word spread that the sheriff himself had sent those men to test Luke, and soon the cowboy realized that if he was to protect Ruth fully, he would have to confront not just drunken cowards but the lawman himself. The tension boiled until the day Luke walked straight into the sheriff's office, Ruth at his side, and said loud enough for the whole town to hear, "You've got a problem with my wife. Sheriff, then your problem's with me. But hear this. No man in this town lays a hand on her. No man mocks her. And no man makes her feel less than she is, because she's worth more than all your pride and all your power." The sheriff, red-faced and furious, reached for his gun, but Luke's hand was already on his revolver, and the crowd outside gasped, waiting for blood. Then Ruth, who had spent her life silent, stepped forward, her voice steady for the first time before the whole town. "No more fighting. I'm not ashamed of who I am, and if any of you think less of me, that's your burden to carry, not mine. Luke chose me because he saw me, the real me, and I won't let anyone take that away." Again, the words struck the crowd like thunder, and for the first time, Red Rock saw not a timid, overweight girl but a woman of strength, standing proud beside her man, and even the sheriff faltered, lowering his gun under the weight of her courage. From that day on, though whispers still lingered, they carried less venom, for Ruth had proven she was not just the woman Luke chose. She was the woman strong enough to stand with him, and together they were unstoppable. And dear listener, if you followed this story into the heart of Chapter 2, if Ruth's courage and Luke's devotion have touched your spirit, then I invite you, don't just watch, don't just listen, but subscribe now, because more stories of courage, love, and triumph are waiting for you. And with each subscription, you keep these tales alive, spreading hope to every corner where it's needed most.